All right. Happy Friday. We made it. We are here. What's going on, everyone? Bess, I think I muted you. Let me unmute you.
Sorry about that. I didn't.
um, Let me make sure I tweet this out. Just one second. Okay. All right, guys. Welcome to the Sabby Sabs show on Hampton Leftists. We are now starting our leftist generational panel. And so, how this is going to work, we are going to have each episode is going to be a different generation. So, we're going to have boomers, we're going to have Gen Z, we're going to have Gen X, which I think a lot of people often forget about Gen X for whatever reason. But tonight, we are going to start with millennials who are, I think, one of the most talked about generations, and not in a good way for whatever reason. But we can get into that tonight. So before we get started, let's let everybody introduce themselves and tell everybody where they can find you. So let's start with Colin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Colin. I am based in DC. I'm an early childhood teacher and an advocate here, education advocate here. I'm also the host of my own channel, Komwawo Mukwano, which actually I said I wasn't going to do it tonight, but it will be premiering tonight. We'll just have to go around it at 9 Eastern Standard Time. So come by and check me out after that. And I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Aaron?
Hey, how you doing, everyone? My name's Aaron. You can find me on Twitter, Aaron Flow Power, PWR. And right now I'm in the Greensboro area. I used to spend some time up in Boston. I was there for a while. And I organize locally. I'm in different organizations locally. I'm all about kind of building coalitions. So despite what's usually going on a national level, on the local level, I'm usually working with a lot of different groups, whether it be MPP, DSA, what have you. There's a lot of different groups that I'm working with. And I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And Bess?
Hi, guys. Sorry about that. I am Bess Godin, and I have a podcast called Millennial Splaining. I believe that our generation has been the most suppressed when it comes to voicing our culture and voicing our experiences. I also, I also believe that, everything is a generational battle. So like a lot of feedback I get from boomers is like, oh, well, you kids think that you can do it better than me and blah blah blah. And I'm like, no, it's not like that. I just want to talk about my generation. I'm just here to talk about my generation. I'm here to provide a voice of my generation, because I feel like there are too few. So that's what I'm here to do. You can find me at millensplain.com or at millensplain on Twitter. And I have a podcast and a YouTube channel. So come check me out.
Awesome. So Nick is in the chat and he said something, and this is how I want to start off this discussion, actually. So he read my mind here. So Nick said, millennials were sold out and destroyed by their boomer parents, the worst treated generation. So I want to open that up to the panel. Like, what are some of the negative things that you hear about millennials that you feel is not true?
I can jump in. So, I mean, right off the bat, I think a lot of this has to do with propaganda, first and foremost, just like everything else. But I mean, just off the bat, like a lot of people talk about millennials being lazy. Mm-hmm. They talk about millennials being entitled, being bratty. And a lot of the problem really is that they never got past the propaganda that started when we were like teenagers and kind of followed us as we grew up. And now some of us are in our 30s and we're like, hey, we're a little bit older than you're kind of portraying here. We're doing a lot of stuff that, doesn't really fit the narrative that you've kind of been force fed. And so I'll get probably deeper into this, but I have my thoughts on why that is, on why there was such a strong push. I think it has a lot to do with labor, about controlling the narrative, about work, about what they knew, what was going to be happening, what they knew what they were doing, whether that was taking away pensions, and now we rely upon 401ks and stuff to that nature. So I think there's a lot that goes into it, and I think that I think a lot of it is just like driven by propaganda.
Yeah. One of the things I heard one time, this guy said this to me on Twitter. He said, I was talking about student loan debt. And he responded with, well, if you stop buying avocados and you stop drinking lattes and stop
Wow.
getting your nails done, then you won't have student loan debt. First of all, I don't even drink coffee. I haven't gotten my nails done in years. I can't even remember the last time, but it was probably for a special occasion. So it's just these assumptions that people have about millennials. It's just ridiculous. Like, I've worked 2 jobs before. Like, I work really hard. I work long hours. Like, the assumptions that they come up with about us is just, it's absurd. Bess, what's your take on this?
I mean, absolutely 100% for what you both said there. I actually have a fun episode on my show with Ron Placone, and we're just myth busting all of those. And avocado toast is the first one we do. Yeah, I have never had avocado toast, and I think a lot of millennials never have. I mean, why would you eat avocado on toast? It just sounds gross. But anyway, so yeah, I definitely believe that when we came of age when the 24-hour news cycle like hit a certain pitch, right? So they needed just filler stories constantly. And when they wanted to do ones about our generation, they just looked at their own kids, and everybody who's in media makes good money. So their kids were doing like echoes of what most of us were doing. If you look at the statistics, boomers hold 55% of this nation's wealth. We own 5. So, and extras own 25%. So, we are, like pretty much trying not to be that stereotypical millennial, right? Because the millennial that's being described in the media is their spoiled ass kids. Of course, you think that millennials are entitled if you're only looking at rich kids, and I also feel, the term entitled is misunderstood in some ways too, in the workplace, because I do feel that millennials have a different, working habits than older generations do. But that's a side note, because most of us can't get jobs. So that's like, number one. I definitely had my experience with retail. I worked in retail for like over 10 years. It's a terrible, terrible job. And pretty much every millennial has done at least one retail job, because those are the only jobs that they're either communists or not. Okay, well, I'm Jewish, so I'm going to go with communist. Uh, yeah, I mean, so the only jobs that were, coming, like the only industries that were growing were the service industries, retail and service industries. And you can see that in the numbers, in 2008 to 2010. 2010 was actually the worst point during the recession, depression, I like to call it. And actually, if you look at it, we had a 25% unemployment rate, which is the exact same as it was in the Great Depression. So we went through a depression, whereas our parents and our older siblings went through a recession. And that's a huge difference in perspective. So
Mm,
anyway, I don't want to take up all the time.
good point. Colin?
To kind of piggyback off what Bess and Aaron said, I think one of the biggest things that I've heard people say about millennials is that we're very transient as far as jobs, that we move from job to job to job to job to job to job. And whereas boomers, like out of college or out of high school, settled into a job and worked there for forever, and then up until retirement, and that was it. But the reality is, from millennials, is that we're not making the wages that would kind of constitute us, to kind of keep a job or stay at a job longer than a few years. When I got out of college, back in the early aughts, my first job, I'm not going to say where, but my first job, I was making about $25K a year. And that was with a bachelor's degree. So, and I was working long hours with, very, very little vacation time. So for me, it was kind of like, I cannot stay at this job for too long because I was barely able to pay my rent. I was barely able to pay my student loans. And at that time, I really didn't have much of a payment for student loans at that time, but even that was too much. So, after like a year and a half, I ended up having to find another job that made more money. And I think that's just the reality of us, is that we're not getting the wages and we're not getting the salaries that are equivalent to our current standard of living to kind of keep up where we could afford to stay at a job long term. And for me as a teacher, it's very important that, I believe that teachers should be staying at schools long term, just as far as setting that standard for students, as well as you as a teacher being able to, developing your craft. And teachers don't get paid well, so, and especially as an early childhood teacher, you really don't get paid very well. So it just kind of maddens me for people to say that, oh, we're transient, and in a way that kind of sounds like we are purposely moving from job to job, when the reality is, for many of us, is that we're trying to keep up with standard of living. Rent gets more expensive, insurance gets more expensive, food gets more expensive. So we have to kind of keep up. And unfortunately, you more often than not looking for other jobs within the first few years after looking for your current job, usually it's more profitable for you. So
yeah, no, I agree. I know, like, like for me, like as a millennial, that is one of the things I heard a lot, is that you guys job hop. And I just want to explain to people that, like, I work in higher ed, and I can tell you, in order to get promoted, you have to job hop. You have to go to another school. You have to go to another department, because they don't just promote you. You can work there for 5 years and have the same title. You might get like the 2% like increase that they give everybody, if they give that. And not all places do that. So in order to increase your salary, that's kind of what you have to do. I mean, it just, and like my parents didn't have to do that. My parents got promoted, just staying in the same job, like just got promoted. So I don't know what that's like.
Yeah, Sabby, can I add to there too? Like, the other aspect, the huge elephant in the room, is that before us, there was incentive to stay where you were. There were pension incentives. That all that stuff doesn't exist anymore. Like, now you have the 401ks. It's not as good. It doesn't incentivize you to stay anymore. Before, people had a reason to put in their years and be loyal. There's zero reason to be loyal at this point. Or there rarely is. If like, there are opportunities that if you get in there, you're lucky if they give you, like you said, more than that, the marginal increase for inflation, whatever it is, 2% here and there. But that's rare. It's like a lot of my friends, that's just a rare thing. So that's the other thing. So I think part of it is that. And then the other thing I know, like, I wanted to piggyback off of something before, was like the propaganda that it takes to kind of divide us up by generations. I think that's intentional. I think it's another ploy to like do that divide and conquer type of thing. The power interests don't want us working together. They're turning boomers against us when we're seeing what's happening before us, complaining about it. And then, but they've already been fed these talking points. Oh, you're lazy. Oh, you're just, you're not trying hard enough. It's like, no, we went through 9/11 in our lifetimes. We went through the financial crisis in 2008. We were promised, they sold us the lie that if you just do the cookie cutter thing, go down that route, go to college, go 4 years, come out, get a good paying job, that's a lie that they sold us. Because even though that may have been true in the past, that's not true at all anymore. like when I got out of college, I went down that path. I went down the 4-year path, and I think there are benefits to it. But like my younger sister, I told her, you don't have to do that. Like if I were to have done it again, and I think a lot of Gen Z can see this now, like you have people suing colleges after COVID for their money back, and colleges weren't even giving it back. Like, so we're in the age of information where you don't really have to go that route anymore. You can get a lot of the information without being put in debt. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on there.
No, I agree. What would you say is the most, when you think about the progressive issues, what would you say is the most important issue to you right now and why?
Yeah, I think just real. I mean, I think the biggest one for all millennials is student debt. I think that's clear cut. I mean, even if it doesn't affect you directly, it affects you indirectly. Like that's how big of an issue this is. And what people don't talk about as much, like I rarely hear people talk about this. I've heard like Brianna Joy Gray talk about this, but this affects more than just millennials. This affects boomers whose kids are millennials, and if they die, they inherit that debt because they've co-signed that. If if they can't move on with plans that they've made for retirement, what have you, because they have to, they were also promised that if their kid went to college, that they would be able to thrive on their own, which, so it affects family, it affects people around you as well. So I think real quick, I would just say student loan debt, even if it doesn't affect you, if it's got a huge impact on it's connected to so many things.
Yeah, Eric Thomas said it's tough though. Seems like you need a degree just to get a survival level job. Bess, what's your take on this?
Absolutely. I mean, we started to see that when we started to apply for jobs, right? I graduated college in 2003. No, that was high school. 2008. I graduated in 2008. So it was like right into the crash, right? Yeah. And so, the only jobs that were available were retail jobs, right? That I had a bachelor's degree. Unfortunately, it was in theater. Everybody was like, what are you going to do with a theater degree? And I was like, I'm going to be a fat bitch on Broadway. And that didn't work out. So, then I went to retail, and I really, I really tried to get any other kind of job. I tried so hard. If I were to go through, and I'm going to do this one day, I'm going to go through my emails from back then and just count how many job applications over the past 10 years that I've sent out, because I bet you it's over like 2,000. That's how many. And you would just go on websites, right? And you would just click apply, and you never ever hear from it. There are several reasons for this. One, the jobs that already were in existence and filled were being shrunk down, right? So the people, that had the jobs stayed in them, and they, fought off everybody else, basically. Like if you want to be a children's librarian in New Jersey, for example, which I tried to do, you basically have to wait for one of them to die before you get a spot, because that's how bad it is, like the waiting list. And it's not even like you get to be paid more than $11 an hour as a public librarian. It's not a good job, but that's just how it is these days. And so anyway, so so the boomers and Xers were able to hold on to the jobs they had, or if they lost those jobs, they were able to get the entry-level jobs that we should have been getting in a boom period, right? And they all had several years of experience and all the degrees and whatever, and that's why it became a baseline for entry-level jobs to be requiring 3 to 5 years of experience. I have seen that multiple times, and that is just disgusting. And a lot of entry-level jobs also got turned into unpaid internships, which we were encouraged to do, to even, we had to have them to even graduate, right? Like for my master's program, I had to have one. So, and I currently have, my parents passed away and we sold our house. So I was lucky enough to pay off my first student loan debt. My second student loan debt for my master's, is completely unpaid because I just was never able to get a friggin' job. There just never was a point in which the economy got better for us. I never saw it. Even though I have friends that have prospered, even though I for the most part, I've seen most people go downhill. That's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah, when you talk about the degrees, like I graduated with a degree in broadcast journalism and English, and I know maybe not the most profitable degree or whatever, and people will come to me and they will say, "Well, you should have majored in engineering."
Right.
Everybody can't be an engineer. I just want to make that clear. People kill me when they say that. Everybody can't be an engineer. Everybody can't go into STEM. That's just the reality. But the thing that really struck me was I was in a similar situation with Bess when I graduated from college. Like I thought I was going to get like this big time job, because I had a degree. And the first job offer I got, they wanted to pay me $8.50 an hour. I was just floored. So of course I turned it down and I ended up waiting tables. And I waited tables for 2 years before I got an office job, and that was in healthcare, and that's what prompted me to hate the healthcare system in this country. But and then eventually went into education. But the fact that someone wanted to offer a college graduate a job for $8.50 an hour. Nobody goes to college to make $8.50 an hour. That's just freaking ridiculous. So I worked in the restaurants, I waited tables, I've done retail, and Bess is right. Those were a lot of the jobs that were available and plentiful at that time. Colin, what would you say is the number one issue for you?
Healthcare. Having been born and raised in the UK, where we have nationalized healthcare, but I was a child, so I didn't know any better. But having lived here and spending some time abroad in Africa, where there are countries where, obviously it's a different standard, but the idea that, I'll give a good example. So when I was in Uganda a decade ago, one of my mentors, his wife, had her baby when I was there. And when she came back from the hospital, I'm not sure how we got to this point, but we kind of asked, well, how much was your hospital stay? And at the time, she said it was the equivalent of like $10, which basically was just like, just staying in the bed, So, and this was at a private hospital in the middle of the bush. So keep that in mind. Now, if you were a local, if you were in Ugandan, that might be a little tough. But for us, it's kind of like, that's nothing. So it's just kind of like, if a third world country is able to somehow do that, and why is it that over here we're charged exorbitant amount for medicine, exorbitant amount for a nickel and dime for everything as far as what we need in order to get well? Also a similar story, like on one of my trips, I had to take a dewormer medicine just in case if I had any worms. So I went to the clinic, got the pill, and I was going to pay. And the doctor, who was an American doctor, said, no, you don't pay anything. And I said, why? Because he said the equivalent, if we were to pay here, would be literally nothing. It was like literally under $0. And I happened to ask him, well, if I were to take this same pill here, how much it would cost? And he said easily $200. So the idea that's like, Big Pharma is able to kind of charge whatever they want for medicine here, I think it's just ridiculous. And I shared this out on Twitter, like I had my physical a few months ago. I had to pay $400 after everything for my labs for my physical, something that you need or is kind of, they say you should have just to make sure that everything is okay. So it's more preventative care, and I'm still getting punished for the fact that I essentially went to get my physical, for things that I needed to make sure that everything is fine. So it just matters me that, like a lot of developing countries have somehow got this idea of being able to take care of their citizens in some way, shape, or form in regards to healthcare, and we haven't figured it out yet. Oh, we know what to do, but it's just that Big Pharma plays a huge part into it. And,
Hmm. I'm thinking about the fact that a lot of us also have this issue, and I think this Gen Z is running into this issue as well, where they're working for companies that offer like a 401k or retirement plan, but they choose to opt out because they can't afford to lose that, deduction in their paycheck. And that's really sad because at some point we will hopefully retire and there's just not going to be much there. Like, I worry about that. I worry about Social Security. Like, is Social Security even going to be around when we're like available to retire? Like, I just wonder about these things. Like, I don't know about you guys. Like, I don't get a pension. I don't get like none of these things. It just does not happen. And so I think that like we unfortunately fell into a time where the economy was terrible. And I honestly feel like it still hasn't really recovered from that. Like, I feel like it got better a little bit, but still, like the job market that we go into, it is incredibly competitive. Guys, I'm seeing like job postings that are asking for people to have 5 years experience for an entry level job coming straight out of college.
I saw that. That was wild. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was crazy.
they're everywhere. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna. I mean, I saw that. I saw a post of that as well, and like, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And what I was gonna say before too is a lot of the time, and this happened all the time when we were around the time when we were getting out of college, but you had an economy that crashed. You had people who were getting laid off en masse. A lot of people who were already in the working workforce. And what happened? So they if you were able to stay, then you would stay in those entry level jobs. And then they weren't hiring us coming out of college. And so yeah, coming up, I did something similar. Like I didn't go straight into an entry level job. I was working, I delivered pizzas. I was working on tips, so I was working below, at the time, below minimum wage, and then hopeful for tips, and that wasn't even a guarantee. But you had to like rely on like the generosity of people, which is not how the system should be, but that's how the system is set up. The whole system's set up for us to fail. So, that's kind of like, and then so navigating that is incredibly difficult, and that's for people who've been here, who've seen what's going on. Like I have friends and family who are not from this country. They're from Trinidad, and so you have situations where you come here, you have to navigate, like you have to know what to do and how to navigate the system. So and I also wanted to say, Colin, like I 100% agree. I feel like Medicare for all or healthcare in general is like the number one, or up there, or arguably the number one issue for like all generations. Like this something that affects everything. And like we talk about jobs, but like what this country does is it ties healthcare to your job. So if they're not hiring those like entry level jobs that offer benefits, that offer healthcare, then you're stuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like it's wild to think that this has been an issue since like Pelosi was like AOC's age, I'm talking about on video, we got to fight for Medicare for all, and then like fast forward like 30 years and nothing has changed, nothing has happened.
Hillary
So
Clinton
that's the
too.
type of stuff that, I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like that affects everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
My
I would even
my
say real quick, like I would say that good jobs, green jobs are number one issue for millennials because of that. And I definitely believe in Medicare for all, and I definitely believe it's a huge issue as well, though. Agreed. Go ahead, Colin.
no, I was just gonna say, like, my mom's a nurse, and she worked in the UK and then obviously here. But I remember as a teen her saying, the healthcare system is just horrible in this country. Just as far as, like insurance can basically kill you as far as, the debt that you can accrue,
Yep.
just, in the name of, if you get sick, that you may not be able to pay, for the fees after you kind of come out. And my mom, who is the most apolitical, very recently when I spoke to her, very apolitical woman, said to me, like, socialized medicine is a wonderful thing. So, so I think it's just the idea of like everything that we do stems around our health. And, and if we don't have the necessary things in place where we're able to do our jobs, we're able to raise our families, we're able to live and be able to be healthy, then we in this country would be a lot better for it. But we barely get paid. We can't really do much, and then on top of that, we have to worry that, oh, if we get sick, then what's going to happen to us? So it's just a burden that we shouldn't have to bear in this country, in the richest country in the world, that we still have that issue. And as I said, other countries and even some, third world countries have it somewhat together as far as being able to take care of their citizens in that way at minimum.
Yeah. I want to jump on. I want to piggyback off of something that you just said, Colin. But I want to point this out too, because Les Bones just said, I've seen tech postings asking for 5+ years experience in software that hasn't even been out for 2 years. And I've seen these things too. Like, this is what is happening to like young people. How do you have 5 years experience in a technology that hasn't even been out for 5 years? Like, it doesn't make any sense, but this is what they're doing. It's very competitive. But Colin, you mentioned something. You were talking about, I just forgot. Shoot. It was something about,
I talked about healthcare, and I talked about, I think, my teaching experience. I think it kind of connects about.
yeah. So one of the things I wanted to bring up too is, how do you guys feel when people, and I'm not going to say it's just boomers, and we're going to do a boomer episode too. How do you guys feel when people make comments to you about maybe not starting families, not buying a house, and they say, we have all these young people out here and they're just, they're doing experiences and they're choosing like not to buy a house and not to start a family? Like, how does that make you feel? How do you guys feel about that?
I mean, I get that from, well, to be fair, my dad is not a boomer because he's in his 80s. So he's the previous generation, technically prior to boomers. But I've gotten that from him as far as I'm in my 40s, early 40s. I don't have a house. I don't have any kids. And he's been like, why you get a house? That's generational wealth. And, especially as a Black person, we need that. And it's like, yeah, but like, I make a decent salary, but the thing is, like, I'm in debt. I'm in school debt. I'm in credit card debt, unfortunately, right now. I wasn't for a few years, and then, just living in DC. DC is expensive as hell, so I can't really save any money. I'm kind of basically living, check to check, unfortunately. And and to be fair, like, you can make the argument that, oh, you went into education, so education doesn't pay well, so you went into the wrong field. And to kind of piggyback off you, Sabby, like, not everybody can go into business. Not everybody can go into engineering. Not everyone can go into medicine, but I think especially as a teacher, you would think that that's if you do it right, a fairly solid career.
Yeah.
And the fact that for me, like, I'm somewhat limited as far as living in the Northeast if I want to make a decent living as a teacher. If I were to live down south or even in the Midwest, I would not be able to keep the salary that I have now. So, so I think just even in that, it's just like I'm kind of limited as far as financially what I'm able to do, to the point now I'm kind of like, is it really worth even being a teacher? Which I hate saying because I love teaching. I love being in the classroom. But at the same time, it's like I have to think about my future. I have to think about in terms of how I'm able to thrive and do well so that, I might be able to have a family one day, or I might be able to have a house. I think it was a comedian who basically said maybe a few years ago that I overheard, but basically they were like, the only way a millennial can get a home is if someone in their family dies. And I kind of feel like, I kind of feel that way. It's like I probably am not going to get any sort of property unless, my parents pass on. And if I'm fortunate enough that they give me something, like in the will or something like that. But yeah, I think that's very much indicative of our experience, is that we're overworked, underpaid, and
Mm-hmm.
really have nothing to show for it as a generation.
Nope. I still have the same car I've had for 11 years now. And people are like, when are you going to buy a new car? And I'm like, never. I'm going to drive that bitch into the ground. Never.
Yeah, I wanted to hop in real quick. Like, I had two things I was gonna say. Like, those posts that I see all the time, I never take them seriously. I always view them as a suggestion. I don't know if that's just like a guy thing, because essentially, like, what I noticed, at least, like, I have friends who are like, "Oh, I'm good at like." I have friends that are guys that are like, "Oh, I'm good enough for this." Like, they have like this like inflated ego, like I can do that, even though they don't like match the description. And then I have friends that are females who basically, they're like, well, I don't meet this requirement, maybe, what have you. So I don't know if that's just like some of the people in my circle, what have you, but I've never taken those things as like at face value. If I feel like, I have an opportunity to like sway them in the room, then and I don't hit all the qualifications, I'm going in there. Like, and that's I've like preached that to everyone in my circle. I've seen it work, and a lot of the times I think it's a copy and paste thing. I think managers that post those aren't really paying attention to that. Like, it's obviously impossible to have an entry level job and then also, have like you have a software type of thing that's only been around for 2 years, and they're looking for experience on that for 5 years. Like, that's impossible. So that was one thing. And then the other thing I was gonna bring up, like, there was I forget what exactly it was. It was like, I think it was about Medicare for all, but I'll stop there. I'll let y'all jump off on that.
Let me just jump in there real quick and say there are a couple reasons actually why you see things like that. And you're absolutely right that there are people making these job descriptions that have no idea what the jobs are. A lot of them are managers, but a lot of them are also recruitment agencies, which have flourished since we came of age. So that's a huge industry now. I mean, there was a point where I applied to like several different recruiting agencies to get a job and couldn't get a job at the recruiting agency, so that's a huge thing. But also there's something that the media never ever talks about, and that is this Obama era. Like, it was part of the 2008 stimulus where, and I'm pretty sure that this is a federal thing, but I found out this definitely happened in New Jersey, that if you have 50 or over employees, or if you keep or maintain 50 or over employees, then, you get a certain tax break. And apparently if you just created a job and then never filled it, then you still got that tax break. So
What?
a lot of that was happening when we were younger, because I remember applying for several jobs that just never went away. I just remember seeing the same job postings over and over again. And it's weird that like they never filled the post, even if they didn't want me, like, so I definitely think that was happening.
I
I
remember.
remember.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Oh, I was just gonna say real quick. I had forgotten what I was gonna say, but it was about the like buying a house and like how it's so difficult for millennials to buy houses. And I was just gonna add, like, it's even more difficult for us now because you have these hedge fund companies that are going up and buying all the properties. That so again, we're getting screwed by like these like financial, like Wall Street type firms that basically got bailed out when we were leaving college around that time. And, we have all this spending that goes overseas to our defense, whether that be, that's what they call it. Like, I say defense, but I mean, we have like unreal numbers, like amount of money being spent, like by the billions, on military and things that could be spent here, could be spent on like investing on people. So even with the PPP loans was the other thing. Just with COVID, like you have people getting bailed out. We had Wall Street getting bailed out again. And once again, during a pandemic, people who are struggling paycheck to paycheck, looking for housing, they're being left out to dry. So that was the other thing I was going to bring up.
I want to shout out the super chat from Greg. It says, if a boomer asks a millennial, why pay so much rent for when you can pay less per month for a mortgage? Respond with, if you want to pay the whole down payment, it'll be that simple. I know, like, where do they think this money is going to come from? Like, oh, okay, we're renting, and all of a sudden we just happen to have thousands and thousands of dollars saved up to pay it, to do that down payment, like on a house. Who do they think we are? Like, this is what we're complaining about. Like, where do you think all this money is coming from? We just told you we're not making a living wage. And one of the things that really, like, I think was surprising to me, when I graduated from college, I had to move back in with my parents for a year. And I never saw that shit coming. And even like as I got older, like moved out, like my parents helped me and stuff. And like, how many of you on the panel had to, even like as an adult, ask your parents for financial help?
Well, my parents had my parents had passed away, and I ended up going through everything that they left me. My mom had like a very small retirement fund because she was not retirement age yet, but she and then we had the house, and I could never find a job that fully supported me renting a room with 4 other people, so I ate up that money, over time. And let me also pop in and say about the house discussion, that the house that I sold was purchased for $80,000, was a gift from my grandfather when my parents got married, so they didn't even buy it. And we ended up selling it in 2008 when there was supposedly like, a market crash for housing, for $335,000. So that is the kind of jump. They got the house in 77. That is the kind of jump you're seeing. We cannot, renting is not a choice, okay? I would love to own a trailer in a trailer park, but renting is not a choice, okay? And we can't, it's once you're in that situation, you can't get out of it.
Yeah, it's really hard to save money. It's really, really hard to save money. And I'm talking, not going out to eat for lunch at work. I know some people that do that every day. Every day they go out to eat for lunch, like bringing my own lunch, like trying to be as, I don't know, like just trying to restrict my funds as much as possible. And still, and still having to ask my parents for like financial help. I remember like I felt embarrassed. It was like embarrassing to me. And it just, I didn't think that at that point in my life, I would still have to do that.
Or even in the reverse, like I come from a culture where like once you're an adult, you send money home, you help out your parents, and the fact that I can't necessarily do that, I mean, it's very hard for me to even, like I hate the fact that, my mom, is in assisted living, and I can't really even help her out, as far as, like what she needs. So, so that I think for me is just it's very sad to think that I can't even support, my parents in the way that they kind of supported me, growing up.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell my parents because my dad told me a while back, he's like, when we get older, you're going to take care of us too. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how much money you think I make, but I work in education. So
Yeah, the other thing too, like this whole thing, it like if you look at what the root of all of this is about, in my opinion, I think a lot of it is about control, like controlling the workforce, Like the question I always ask myself, like, why not just help people who are in debt? Why not just cancel that student debt? Why not just do this? Why not just provide health care for people? And at the end of the day, like when you follow the money, the reason is we don't do a draft anymore. So how do they incentivize people to go into the military? They say, oh, go to the military, we'll pay for your school. That's the logic. And that's how the system is designed. I wanted to also bring up, there was an article I think that came out today or yesterday. It was like very recently. Centrists are celebrating because a new reform that Biden just passed about student loan debt. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but basically, a new thing just got passed that will help eliminate, I think, all student loan debt for about 22,000 people. So out of all the people in this country who have debt, student loan debt, about 22,000 of them or so will have it forgiven. And when I got into the weeds of it or what's going on, basically back when we were going into the jobs, like leaving college or whatever, they made a promise that said, if you go into public service of any kind and you stay there for 10 years, then your student loan debt will be forgiven. And what happened, you guys know, they lied. That was a lie. Yep. That did not happen. So what ended up really happening is what people would go in, they would go to the service, they'd make their payments, they'd do everything right, everything they were promised, and then they would apply and their application would be denied. And I think, and it was like 96% of people. Yeah, it was crazy. So this reform that is being passed is a change in the law to basically to make a common sense thing. And this was like a bipartisan regulation that was like put forth by like Marco Rubio and like Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire. And that's the thing. That's the thing that they've cherry picked to like do victory laps on. And are we sure? Great. You did something. Yes. It's better than nothing. But at the end of the day, we're in a dire situation. Like I have friends, I have family who are in dire situations. And this, at the end of the day, doesn't help the majority of people. And you lied. And so my point, to tie back to the whole military thing, my point here is, what's their reasoning? What's the logic? They are having trouble getting people to sign up for the things they want them to do, whether it's working in government, working in these public service. They have trouble finding people for jobs, and people are not wanting to do jobs. Like they just X'd the whole unemployment benefit situation, and people, like, it's not really changing the needle very much because people are sick of it. Like we're still in a pandemic. They're just trying to control us. That's my opinion. I think they're just trying to control us. I think they're using these like small measures to coerce people who do not trust their promises anymore. Yep. To say, hey, look, we are going to forgive if you work here for 10 years, whether it's like nurses or teachers or people working in local government or whatever. They're basically saying you can apply again and we will accept that. And, I think that's not enough. At this point, I don't think it's enough. So,
but it's crazy too, because even some of those arrangements for teachers, it's like you have to teach in a needs-based area or like you have to teach in like a rural area. There's all these like stipulations that come with those arrangements that they pretty much guarantee for you. And I honestly think that this is part of the reason why more people in this country are not wanting to go into fields like education, because they don't pay as much and the cost of living is high. And we haven't adjusted like the pay rate for inflation. So this is going to be a problem, because the thing is, like, you need teachers. You have to have people to teach. Look at what's happening with the bus drivers. Like right here in Massachusetts, the bus drivers are like, yo, I'm out. I'm not doing this. So they have to bring in reserves. They have to bring in military reserves to drive the school buses. So I think like this is like a wake up call. Hopefully this is the beginning of a wake up call for like people and corporations in power, because you have to start paying people a living wage. I don't know what's going to happen for us, like millennials. Like, I don't feel like I'll ever be able to pay off all my student loans. Like, I honestly feel like I'll be in the grave and they will put the bill on top of my tombstone. Like, I really just, and that's sad. That's unfortunate. One more question for all of you before we go, because I also like to talk about solutions as well. In reference to millennials, what do you feel could be a possible solution to help get us out of this situation?
I'll go first if you want. I've got two suggestions, and I'm still researching both of them. Firstly, I would like to know a lot more about a debt strike. I absolutely believe millennials should just not pay student loan debt. I certainly am not. I'm jumping the gun because I can't afford it anyway. So I've been ducking my debts for a long time. But honestly, it sickens me because Biden could, with the stroke of a pen, cancel all student loan debt, all of it.
Which is what he promised.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And he they've already paid all of it, right? So you don't even have to know about MMT or financial things to understand this, but like they've already paid this debt. So they could just say, "Oh, you know what? You don't owe us anymore." They've already paid it. The money's been spent. It's not coming out of the treasury or something. It's gone. So there's no reason that they can't just say, "Okay, forget it. You guys have had it rough. The economy needs a boost. I'm forgiving all student loan debt." It would not hurt them one penny. Anyway, so that's one thing, debt strike. The other thing I think that we should start to think about is co-ops and creating small businesses that are focused on socialist principles. They're focused on a democratic method of determining what the workers' compensations are going to be and stuff like that. And I think that we need, we are specifically primed to do that because we grew up with a lot more like group projects when we were kids, right? And that was actually a development that came about when we were young, right? Because the boomers, the hippie boomers, right, got to sort of try out their experimental teaching theories on us, right, on the Xers and us. But I think that certain things became institutionalized, and group projects were a big one. So one, we already like have the knowledge of how to sort of self-organize, and two, we are the most educated and skilled group of people, even though there is plenty of propaganda that says there's some kind of skills gap and that's why they don't hire us. Well, guess what? I got a bajillion skills because you didn't hire me for this job and this job and this job and this job. So I'm going to make my own company now. And I highly encourage that everyone tries to do that. I think a lot of us are already trying to do that. We all have side hustles. We're all trying to make extra cash on the side. Take those side hustles seriously, make that an end goal for you, and make it so that you and your family or family of friends can, survive on this small business. And I really hope that in a lot of ways, we will not only encourage people to sort of patronize only small businesses, but also we will sort of choke the larger corporations because we refuse to work for them. So these are big, grandiose ideas. I hope that it inspires some people, and I certainly have a lot more research to do about them. But anyway, those are my suggestions.
All right, Colin.
That said it, general strike. But I think really that's the only way for our government officials to get to realize, oh, we actually need to do something, otherwise we're fucked, and right now it's like people are just so apathetic, right now just to life that, and our government leaders know that. So they're like, oh, we don't have to do anything because no one's going to do anything. And so I really feel like it's just a matter of, I think, like you and Sabby left Hampton Leftists and other independent media channels just to kind of continue getting the word out and speak to people about the reality of we don't have to take this lying down. Like these are issues that unless that we force their hand to be like, you must do this and we demand that you do this for us, then they're not going to do anything. And these issues are not going to be resolved. And so I think a lot of it is having to do with a shift in thinking in the idea that I think especially when it comes to voting, like the idea that when we vote these politicians in, it's just like we just brush our hands. It's like, okay, like you're in there now, you take care of it, and I'm just going to continue with your life. Whereas really, as someone said to me recently, like that's the first step, like getting them in the door. You need to follow up with them as far as making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do and put your foot on their neck to ensure that they do it. And I think there has to be a change in thinking in realizing that people collectively, if we all collectively, with our education and with our mindset, if we're all able to come together and come against the establishment, then they will have to take us seriously. But because they do a good job of kind of saying, like, oh, the issue is with this person, or the issue is this with group, or the issue is like we're all attacking each other and they're just kind of sitting pretty, like in their mansions or whatever, having a grand old time. So I think it's just really a matter of communicating to people the right way of the reality of what is happening in our government, that it is set up against us, and having people who I think who are willing to speak that truth. And, I think essentially a general strike, it has to happen, in this country. I don't see how, and it's amazing how, you can look online and see other countries are kind of taking a stand, especially in Europe and Australia right now, and it's kind of like, and we're not doing anything. And it's kind of like, we have to make some noise about this, because otherwise things are not going to change for us. And then we're going to complain, oh, things are going to change. The only change that's going to happen is if we make it happen.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's just more solidarity with each other, especially, and I think especially with issues like pertaining to like, because I think even just in something like college, like only about a third of the population has a college degree. So for a lot of people, it's just like, well, why should you get student loans? Because I don't getting anything, like, so why should we benefit like the elite people, as they say? And I'm like in West Virginia or wherever, and I don't have a degree. I'm not getting anything. So why should I try and benefit these rich folks? I think really the other idea that we need to focus on like issues that are centralized around everybody, like healthcare, like higher wages, like housing. Like these are the bread and butter issues that I think all of us collectively can, whether you're on the right or the left, can mutually agree on. So I think just more solidarity on, on those issues, collectively, that we're able to make a stand against the establishment and demand that changes can be made. And I think the only way that's going to happen is people put their foot down and start striking.
Well said. Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, Colin, Best, y'all said it perfectly. I mean, I echo fully what you said. I guess the only thing I would add, like, for me, like if I'm breaking this down from like an inside game, whether it be electoral politics wise, I think it's important to do what's necessary to put pressure on people, but I don't think that's enough. I think the majority of our effort should be in the outside game. That's where I'm focusing now. So direct action, and as Colin, you put it so eloquently, a general strike. And like when we look at history, when things get done, it's with unions organizing, it's with a coalition coming together in a concerted effort, in a very focused goal to accomplish those goals. So I think that's what we need to do. Like I think one of the biggest takeaways I've had from Bernie's campaign is the whole not me, us. I really took that to heart when he was campaigning. I truly did. me personally, like I came out of college just like 30,000 K in debt. And, you know, I recently paid my undergrad. I'm currently doing my MBA and I paid that off, but it didn't, I think the problem I'm seeing a lot, and this goes with between generations. The problem I'm seeing is if something doesn't affect you personally, people are like, oh, that's not my problem. And that's a big issue, because what's happening is a lot of the problems that we've talked about. I mean, it's not just millennials, but like you see boomers that are like, well, I don't have student loan debt.
Yep.
I don't have kids that have this debt. And so it's not my problem. So they don't care. So I think a solution would be to, like, you know, internalize a type of philosophy that kind of like perpetuates this. We're all in this together. I don't agree with 100% of what this group is doing or what that group is doing, but we all agree that Medicare for all is important. We all agree that we should, you know, cancel student debt. And so if we can all come together and do something, with whether it's a general strike or whether it's getting legislation passed via MMT with a swoop of a regulation to cancel or print money into our economy that eliminates that, incentivize it with jobs, with, like, you know, green, like a Green New Deal type of legislation that does the two things, that cancels student debt, puts people to work, and puts people to work towards something that is beneficial for our environment. That's what we need to do. And, you know, it's not, and they know this. That's the thing that's crazy. Politicians know this. Joe Biden knows this. AOC knows. They all know this, and we've elected them to do their job. They're supposed to be doing this, and they're not. And, you know, there's no excuse right now. There's no, you know, they control the Dems control the White House. They control the Senate. They control the House. They can repeatedly, you know, come up with excuses to not do anything. And it's this whole dog and pony show. And then they do laps in celebration talking about a reform for something that they promised us 10 years ago that they're just barely doing now. This is wild. So, you know, I think, you know, also people who have paid into their student loan debt and have accrued interest, what's the point of that interest at this point? This is just about, they're just gouging people to death, literally to death. So I think wiping out interest, crediting them on only principal, this gets into the weed of like the finances, but crediting them only on the principal that they've paid, and at least wipe out interest. There's no need for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those are some of the things I feel like would help. But like many things, it won't happen if we don't have some sort of direct action. I think a general strike is incredibly important. I think there needs to be some sort of structure that protects people, because fear, they control everyone with fear. So fear is what holds people back from participating in these things. So I think it's like educating them on overcoming that fear, doing what they need to do, and stand in solidarity with each other. I think those are what we need to do.
Awesome. All right. I want to thank all of you for coming on and having this discussion. For those of you who came in later on, we're going to do an episode on each generation. So tonight was millennials. We're going to do boomers, Gen X, Gen Z. I need some help getting people for the silent generation. I'm struggling with that one. So if you know someone, feel free to comment below. Let me know. And guys, you want to tell everybody, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'll jump in if you don't mind. You can find me at Millennsplain on Twitter. You can find me at millennsplain.com. You can please donate to either my PayPal or to my Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/millennsplain. And if you donate to my Ko-fi, that way you also do super chats, because right now I'm not doing lives, although I may do them soon. So if you'd like to super chat me, or you'd like to see your comment or small business on one of my episodes, then please donate there. And all my links are on millennsplain.com. And thank you so much for having me. This was great. It was so great to meet you, Colin and Aaron. And thank you, Sabby. Always a pleasure.
You too, Bess. So you can find me on Twitter at Obona_Colin. You can also find me on my YouTube channel, Komawa Wukwano. Yeah, as I said, I'm having issues with YouTube with that at the moment, so I'm actually going to be live streaming on my personal page. But if you subscribe, then yeah, I'm not sure how that's going to work, but I'll figure it out somehow. But yeah, you can definitely find me on those two places. And yeah, thank you so much, Sabby, for having me on, and it's nice meeting you both.
Yeah, definitely. It was nice meeting everyone. You can find me on Twitter at Aaron Flow PWR, Aaron Flower Power, basically. And I really enjoyed being on here, and I thank you, Sabby, for having me on.
Thanks so much for coming on, guys. Guys, if you feel like staying up a little later with me tonight, you can catch me on my channel at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is Revolution Podcast is coming on, and we are going to talk about the Democratic Party and how it has failed African Americans, and how did we move away from the teachings of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. So join me at 8 p.m. on Sabby Sabs. Other than that, guys, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.